Russia is demanding NATO hold an emergency summit to discuss Seymour Hersh's reporting that the Nord Stream pipeline was intentionally sabotaged by the U.S. A spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry said in a statement, quote, "There are more than enough facts here. The explosion of the pipeline, the presence of a motive, circumstantial evidence obtained by journalists. So when will an emergency NATO summit meet to review the situation?"
Though the White House slammed claims that the CIA blew up the pipeline as, quote, utterly false and complete fiction, Hersh reports that the orders came directly from President Biden himself. What do you make of this story, Robby?
Well, we talked about this a few days ago. Brianna and I talked about it. Seymour Hersh is a very credible journalist who's done a lot of terrific work in the past. His work is not beyond criticism. It has been criticized for inaccuracies as well. But that doesn't discredit this. This is impressive reporting. And also, you know, he's filling in gaps for something the U.S. itself said, right? There was the statement from U.S. officials that the ominous kind of suggestion that something would happen to have Nord Stream 2 not function. So with all that in mind, and of course, you know, the U.S. has a long history of, like many other governments, of sabotage and interference and all sorts of things. You know, the additional details that it was this diving team based out of Florida all sounds very plausible to me. However, the Substack post where he published it, you know, he's relying on what seems to be, from my reading of it, a single unnamed source. So that maybe this is a very knowledgeable person who is like unimpeachable, but I can't evaluate that because I don't know who it is. And also because he just published this on Substack, it wasn't, you know, like published by the New Republic or the New York Times or Reason Magazine or Newsweek, right? You or I, as an editor, didn't get to say, well, who was this source? You know, you don't have to publicly disclose it, but you have to tell the editor so they know. Like, it didn't do any of that. So because of all that, I can only take it. It can only take me so far in thinking that, you know, this kind of changes the narrative or makes it more likely that the U.S. did it. What's your thinking?
Yeah, I mean, a single unnamed source, right, is not the standard we generally think of for the best quality journalism, although I have no problem with him publishing it. If a source told him that, of course, I believe 100% that he was told this by the source. I don't think he made that up, right? That He has every right to publish that. And, you know, you take it with a grain of salt, right? Like, and a single unnamed source told him this. Okay, fine. You know, I will say of the four potential culprits here, you know, Russia, the U.S., the Ukraine, and some other NATO country, the U.S. is sort of low on the list for me of people who really have a motive here. You know, maybe just above Russia, but certainly far below Ukraine. You know, now we don't have that enough information to say, so I don't want to like make a speculation here. But I've never been convinced that we had a strong motive to do this. I don't. This doesn't strike me as characteristic of President Biden. We've been talking today a lot about how, you know, muddled his foreign policy has been, and this action would have been the kind of thing that I think somebody with much more of an appetite for big statements on the foreign policy front would have done. All of which is, but is to say, I don't think there's anything wrong with there being a NATO investigation into it. It does seem like an important thing to know, to find out, you know, like I would like more information about this. And I think the fact that Russia is calling for a NATO investigation, to me, suggests that they still, to a certain extent, you know, respect some aspect of NATO.
Yeah, that is interesting. You're right that they're speaking to NATO's credibility is kind of actually funny.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think that's very heartening, you know, to me, to say that they see in NATO a body worthy of carrying out an investigation. To me, that's the headline here, is that Russia is still engaging at that level with NATO as a body. And I think that we should want answers. There should be an investigation, not because Russia's calling for it, but because it is actually really important who did this.
Right.
And the only reason they're not doing it is because it harmed Russia, and everybody hates Russia now, right? And Russia's the big bad and the big evil right now. That's not a good enough reason for us to simply wash our hands of this. Like, I would like more information. So I think there should be a NATO investigation into this.
I agree with that. I want to know if it was the U.S. because I want to hold the government accountable if it was. I don't think it would have been appropriate. We're not at war with Russia. We're not. We're not actually committed, because because of NATO to defending Ukraine. Ukraine is not actually part of NATO. This has already gone far beyond, what I think is necessarily appropriate without greater oversight. I guess Congress has to at least approve the weapons, but they didn't have to approve. They had no knowledge of this. My understanding is that Seymour Hersh is alleging that the Gang of Eight, like certain the relevant Congress people who are supposed to be informed by top secret stuff, weren't kept in the loop because they wanted to make sure no one could trace it to the U.S. That, that's his thinking. And again, take that with a grain of salt. But that is totally inappropriate to me if that's accurate. And people need to be held accountable for what's sabotaging a pipeline that provides an ally, Germany, with resources. That's nuts. And we cannot discount the fact that Biden he once said, if Russia invades, there will no longer be a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. So I think he looks plausibly guilty based on rhetoric from Biden and other administration officials, kind of maliciously suggesting something would go wrong with Nord Stream. Now, maybe they were saying that to try to deter Russia from doing anything, not because they were going to follow through on that threat. I don't think it's out of character necessarily for the U.S. government. I know the governments lie. Our government is no different. I have a differences of opinion with some, I think, on the left, on the right. I don't know on what fringes, who kind of think the worst of the U.S. government, but like it's specifically the U.S. government, like all other governments, they kind of feel more trusting of. Like I don't think the U.S. is more reprehensible or more untrustworthy than other governments. I think government, by its nature, creates bureaucracies that try to shield people from the lies to people, works in its self-interest, et cetera. Can be advised by cabals of powerful interests. That's true of all governments. It's not like more true of the U.S. government. So we could do something like this. I wouldn't put it past us. I don't think it's necessarily the most likely thing. And I don't. Then people say, well, why would Russia do it? Why would the U.S. do it? It doesn't. If someone did something that it was destructive and doesn't make a lot of sense. Russia is the country invading another country right now, so we can't rule that out. I don't know that the Ukrainians have the capability. You would understand why they would do it. I don't know that they have the capability to do it. But it is a mystery that absolutely demands further investigation, because if it's us, I want to know and hold the relevant officials accountable.
Yeah, 100%. I don't mean to be letting the U.S. government off the hook or Biden off the hook. I do think when he said there would be no more Nord Stream 2, he could have been referring to just, his belief that the Germans would, I don't know, start, have a complete embargo on Russian gas. I mean, there's many ways to interpret that. Plus, we know that, President Biden runs his mouth and says things that, he often doesn't mean, right? So he's the gaffe king. So to me, that's, to get from there to this was the work of the U.S. government is a bit of a stretch, especially because we keep saying what is the motive there? Was at a time when, U.S. gas prices were, so astronomically high. I mean, the idea that Biden would have done anything that would have pushed them higher just seemed to me not likely. But I want more information like you. I think it's a great idea. NATO should definitely have an investigation. And, the U.S. government should be more forthcoming about, give us something that we can hang our hat on when we say it doesn't seem like something they did.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll have more Rising right after this. Stay with us.